Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice to see you all, I forgot to say.
30, I see 30 now. Yeah. Ja. Allemaal geopend. Oké, well.
Wacht nou even.
Ja?
Ze komen nu binnen.
Oké,
They will come now. 28. 29.
Come great. Ja.
Oké. Start je mij, Frans?
Ja?
Start mij.
Okay, well, welcome to everybody. It is third webinar of our series on energy transition, Africa, the Netherlands, Africa, Europe. For our energy transition, we need the increasingly more hydrogen. Now and in the future, European Union is making plans, and the Dutch government has already made some policy agreements with a number of countries. Regarding Africa, it's Morocco, Namibia, South Africa, etc. And besides, the former government issued the new Africa strategy and said, well, we should do that at a just and equal way with equal partnership, etc. So the basic question for the webinar is, well, okay, if we are going to have hydrogen projects with African countries, how are we going to do that in a just and equal mode? And that's exactly the issue of this afternoon. We have 3 speakers today. That will mean that there's a bit limited time for discussion. So we'll see how we manage. But the speakers are very interesting trial because they have a look from different angles. First of all, Willem de Vries. He is involved in a very practical, concrete hydrogen project in Namibia, in the planning and the implementation of it. Secondly, we have Clara Kayafa. She is a researcher at the Eindhoven University in the group of Helene de Koning, maybe known to you. And she's from Brazil and has a very, very interesting case about a hydrogen project somewhere in Brazil. Regarding especially the social and economic context, so the context also of the international markets. So how can we do a project? How can we realize a project in a just and equal way? And thirdly, Nienke Homan. Nienke Homan is from the organization Impact Hydrogen Africa. It's an organization who tries to realize sustainable hydrogen projects in Africa, put forward the idea of energy valleys. And she's also involved in a European project on a just green hydrogen Africa. Nienke is a real African because she's with us. Hi, Nienke. Raise your hand. Yes. She's with us from Botswana at the moment. And, well, of course, there are some slight technical problems, but she's there. And we decided to have her first in the presentation. And then we will continue with the presentation of Willem de Vries. And finally, the one of Clara Kayafa. Nienke will try to stay with us during all the webinar, but maybe it's she has to cut at some moment. Well, we'll see. So that's it. Nienke, may I invite you to the floor?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for addressing this very important topic. Yes, indeed, live from somewhere the border between Africa and Botswana. I'm not sure where I'm exactly, but I think more more down south, so I'm in South Africa now. But the internet is changing all the time. That's a little problem. So that's why I indeed like to start quickly and leave room for questions, perhaps at the end if I'm still there. So yes, we're from Impact Hydrogen. And I used to be a regional minister in the Northern Netherlands and involved in boosting, sustainable development. And part of it was to, sustainabilize the industry. And therefore, I was actually not an expert on that part. So I asked the experts, what can we do? And we have to get rid of natural gas or fossil fuel, fossil materials, fossil feedstock. And then the solution was, one of the solutions as a part of the new system is hydrogen. So I was working on hydrogen for a long time in the Northern Netherlands, in a way, an approach that was called the Hydrogen Valley. And that means that you don't only, look at the technical part, but also the ecosystem around it. And the ecosystem and the technical part can accelerate each other and can also let hydrogen benefit, be beneficial for local communities, local people, small and medium enterprises. So that Hydrogen Valley approach was, well appreciated by the European Commission. So they funded it, but they also said, we need more than 50 of these hydrogen valleys in Europe and over 100 all around the world. We want to create these kind of hydrogen valleys. These are a kind of hydrogen hubs, and then connect them and really scale this hydrogen economy. So in Impact Hydrogen, so after I stopped as a regional minister, I said, this is an approach that might also benefit the countries that trade. So not only within a country, but also between countries. So we really have to look for a way how we can be beneficial. I think someone has to mute the mic. I think Wim de Jong, to be honest. And so we started thinking, how can you create hydrogen valleys in regions where hydrogen will be produced at a large scale in a way that also, can be used for export, but also be beneficial for local communities. This is something that you really have to organize. And this is what we do at Impact Hydrogen. And we do it in the Netherlands, in Spain, but also on the African continent. And that's why I'm here quite often. Last week I was in Morocco, this week in Namibia and South Africa, working on, the sustainable way of creating hydrogen trade. And we were also involved, and I think this is quite a successful project already. It was a call from the European Commission, and that is called Just Green Africa. How can you organize the trade between the African Union and the European Union in a way that is beneficial as well for Europe, of course, by helping decarbonize industries, but also really sustainable trade relation, because it also benefits the African continent and the African countries. Can you advise on how to organize this? This is a 2-year project with a large consortium. And last week in Morocco, we had actually the last meeting. And we did a part of the socioeconomic study. It was a very broad study. We made an analysis of where in for example, on the African continent, do you have the best water availability? Where are the best opportunities for electrolyzer production? What are the best opportunities in case of job creation? So we did a lot of research and also on the socioeconomic part. And I'd like to share some insights, of course, not all, because it was a very large project, some insights with you. Let me share the screen. I hope it works. Please let me know if you see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yep, there it is. Okay.
I'll try to change it. Yes. So it's actually called Promoting a Transition for Green Hydrogen in Africa. And we did some research on differences. What is the difference between Europe and what's the difference and compared to the African Union? So actually it's African countries on the African continent, not specific the African Union. So there's a big difference between certification and standards. So the EU already started with emission standards for green hydrogen, and the AU standards are still emerging and less aligned. They're working on it, but it's not there yet. So that's why the advice is develop mutual AU-EU certification system that balances EU standards with EU capacities. So that's very important because then you talk the same language, it's easier to trade. And as you all probably know, especially from the Netherlands, we have a dense gas infrastructure, and that can easily be transformed to a hydrogen infrastructure. This is really typical Western European Union, but also in the rest of Europe, it is, well, we have quite a good infrastructure. And this is something that can be, well, transformed to hydrogen infrastructure with a little bit extra. The African Union has limited local natural gas and also a less dense infrastructure. So it's also harder to create hydrogen infrastructure because you have to build it all over again. So that's why you really have to support infrastructure, hydrogen infrastructure on the African continent. And you can do it with tax credits, subsidies, and well, cooperation between governments and companies. And you have to really encourage investment. And then, of course, a very important one, domestic use versus export. So the European Union are mostly focused on hydrogen imports, and the African Union has emphasizes minimally the domestic hydrogen use. So, and if you want to create, well, really a transition also in the global south, you really have to support that also. So establish African Union policies to set local use mandates, balancing domestic consumption and export to foster regional markets. And of course, the community benefit mandates. So within the European Union, we have different approaches. Think of like in the Netherlands, if you have a wind farm, half of it should be a cooperative. And this is not something that is well aligned already within the whole of Europe. We have different approaches, but in the African Union, it is even less. So this is really what we have to formalize and create standards. Then we have the financial support mechanisms, they differ. We have technology transfer that we really have to organize. And of course, the environmental standards, very important. So we have in the EU, we have, of course, one set of rules in the European Union for water use, emissions, and biodiversity, the Natuurherstelwet. And the African Union has less standardized standards. And one of the most important parts, and the European Union has, it's not completely true, but almost an established workforce skilled in hydrogen technology. It's not completely true, so it's a little bit too strong here because it's not there yet, but we have a lot of expertise in molecules, and we are working on, of course, on skilling people, and we have, well, a lot of schools that already have programs, reskilling programs, and we think the African Union really has a skills gap. So by cooperating, you can really establish an AU-EU educational and technical training program, and that can really benefit both. So this is something that we can perhaps further promote together. So we did a lot of, this is one of the, we of course did not do all the research by ourselves. We had a lot of questionnaires, we did a lot of workshops, and we saw a lot of similarities. Yeah, so people want to want the EU to invest in capacity building, help with policy alignment, help with research and innovation, a community-centered approach, and of course the infrastructure development. And this is very important. We have to do this together. So it's not something that you can, as European Union, you have to support partners in the African Union that want it. And so you can offer your support and make it part of the beneficial contract with mutual benefits. And that's why we said, well, we do some policy recommendations, and it's good perhaps to say that the most of the workshops and questionnaires, of course, were on the African continent. So we did a lot of interviews in especially 5 countries, of which South Africa was one, but also Morocco, Kenya, Namibia, Egypt, and I forgot one. So we took like 5 countries that can be like an example of the other countries, from the north, the south, the west, and the east. And that we say we have to do, that's why we give some policy recommendations. We have to work on market development. We have to work on the skills development and R&D development. We have to help prioritize hydrogen above fossil fuel with tax exemptions. We have to transfer knowledge, and we have to reskill people. And we have to organize the local benefits. We have to make it easier to invest in African countries, and especially, of course, the hydrogen projects. And we have to work on a CSRD, so the corporate sustainability approach, and really make it part of every approach and not just something that comes at the end. And we also risk assessment and also did some, proposed some ideas how to mitigate it, and especially on the environmental, the technology, market demand, financial and political resistance. I think the last one, and also the local expertise, of course. And I think the political resistance is very important. What we saw, for example, is that there was quite often a conflict of interest. And we also saw that it was quite hard to, most of the time there were national visions, but it was not implemented in a local and regional level. And that's very important because most of the countries, of course, have a democratic system. So only a national vision, it's the same in Europe. I think only a national vision is not enough. You have to integrate it in regional policies. And we made a timeline. And we hope to have that timeline to develop the same time in the African Union as in the European Union, because then you can really create good trade relations. So this is, I think, a start of, a brief summary of the work we did together with a consortium. And I think there's room for some questions as I'm still here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Very, very inspiring. Also with your European outlook as well. Very good recommendations. I told you, as a Dutch government, we have made some memorandum of understanding, some political agreements, a number of countries. What should be your highest recommendation to the Dutch government to go on with the MOUs?
Yeah, I think it's always very hard to, I think everyone will say, I'd like to have a sustainable relationship with mutual benefits. And most of the time, if you have a memorandum of understanding, it also says, we have to work on the sustainable development goals. It has to be beneficial to both of us. We have to create also a local market in the region where the hydrogen is produced. And for the African countries, it is mostly very important that there is a situation created where they do not only export I saw one of the remarks, hydrogen is not an energy source. Of course, it's not. That's mostly made with solar or wind. And then the hydrogen is produced. But people here in Africa, they want to make products and not only sell the hydrogen. That's good, but they also like to sell products because there's a higher added value to products than to raw materials or energy. So I think it's very wise as a Dutch government if you put in an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, or the start of working together, also for companies that work together, that you make something like a long-term agreement on how you will really do that. And a lot of countries here, they need schooling, so they want to really involve and help create small and medium enterprises working in a sustainable way, but they lack the information. So schooling people is essential, and giving people information on what you might do with hydrogen. For example, if you want to create sustainable industries or ceramic industry, use the hydrogen for high temperature or for clean cooking, you have to know a little bit about it before you can see what it might bring for your company.
Yeah. So
sharing knowledge is one of the first steps, but also share information and share innovation and also exchange information about what you can do, and perhaps also share a part of the hydrogen that is produced, or perhaps the renewable energy that is produced, for local use.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
a hard part, huh?
Yeah.
And I think because we can advise that it would be wise to do something, but this is something that the local communities and the municipalities and the regions have to decide themselves if they want to have a little bit of the hydrogen or a large part of the hydrogen or renewable energy for themselves and make agreements with the companies. But I think the first MOUs have to really promote the mutual benefits, not only the benefits for the buyer, but also for the hydrogen producer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Looking towards Richard, you watched the chat questions. Is there any fundamental question at the moment to Nienke?
Not yet, but I've seen that Kianne de Kleine, a researcher from Eindhoven University, has just entered our meeting.
Yeah.
She's done interesting research into the carbon footprint of green hydrogen, which is not zero, because making solar panels, wind turbines, electrolyzers, of course, involves CO2 emissions. So does transportation of hydrogen from Africa to Europe. And there is the risk of hydrogen leakage, which also raises the question whether it would not be better to produce things like green fertilizers or e-fuels for airplanes in Africa instead of in Europe. So perhaps Kianne de Kleine could say something about that.
Kianne is a colleague of Clara Caiava. Kianne, are you there?
Yes, I am here, but I just dropped in, so I have no
Okay.
idea what you have discussed. So I think Richard definitely gave a good summary of research that I am doing, also in collaboration with Clara. But it's a bit hard for me to react on things I haven't heard.
Okay,
So
we postpone it till the discussion afterwards.
Frans? I saw a
Take your
question in-
ease, Clara. Yeah, Nienke?
I saw a question in the chat, huh? So, is energy from hydrogen possible at all? I think as some also mentioned in the chat, so you can produce the hydrogen by using renewable energy and using electrolysis to make hydrogen. But you can also do it the other way around. Use hydrogen and then make renewable energy again, electricity in this case. So this is also a way to store hydrogen or to store energy by using the hydrogen and store it in a tank or underground, and then use the hydrogen for electricity again. And this is also one of the solutions a lot of African countries need because they don't have such a sufficient energy system as we have in the Netherlands, and they really miss it. So this is where hydrogen is so interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Well, let's postpone the discussion and first go over to Willem. To have some practice from Namibia. Willem, you're involved in the Hyphen project. So please tell us.
Yes, thank you, Frans. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I work for a German company, renewable energy producer. We build solar and wind projects historically in Germany, but the company has expanded to a number of other countries, as for example, Spain, Uruguay, Vietnam, South Africa. And a number of these projects are hydrogen projects, of which some in Germany again, and a number are in countries like Namibia or Uruguay or Brazil. And these projects are typically focused on producing a molecule that can be transported to Europe or to Korea or to Japan. The reason is that these countries have a lot of energy demand and are situated at places that, well, as you might know, especially this time of the year, the sun doesn't shine that nicely. We do have a good share of wind, but also not as much as in other places of this world. Now, what I will try to do now is give you an impression of one of these projects. It's a relatively large one taking place in Namibia, or being developed in Namibia. And let me start sharing the screen to do so. So please, a quick confirmation that the screen is visible. Perfect.
Yeah, we see your sheet.
Perfect. So what I'll try to do here today is just talk a little bit on the main numbers of the project. I'll get you a map later on in the process just to help locate the project, where it is in the world and in Namibia. But just to give you a rough feeling of what we are talking about, we're looking at a project that will be, if constructed as in the shape it is, build some 3.5 gigawatts of solar and 4 gigawatts of wind. To put it into perspective, the Netherlands has installed at this moment, I believe, 24 gigawatts of solar. So roughly a sixth of that capacity we would like to install for this project alone. 800 wind turbines, just to give a sense of the scale of the project. The reason that these things need to be relatively large is because in the end, economies of scale are the ones that enables these value chains. Sorry. And if the project would be a lot smaller or half or quarter the size, the price would be unacceptably high. The choice of molecule in this project is ammonia, and the reason is that we don't want to be looking for carbon in Namibia. Namibia is a very dry, arid country with very little agriculture. There is just no carbon available, sea molecules, sea atoms to make methanol or any other molecule out of it that could carry the energy. I will not go into the further applications of ammonia, just for the sake of time. I'll focus on the project itself. And I want to kick off with the point that this project, in contrast to a lot of projects that take place elsewhere in the world, for example, in Egypt or Mauritania or Brazil, is a governmentally led initiative rather than a private one. The government of Namibia allocated parcels of land that they wanted to become hydrogen valleys or corridors as they call it. And there they launched tenders, which we participated in, and the Namibian government evaluated the bids on basis of how good they are technically, how good they are financially for the country, but also how good they provide additional value for the Namibian population, for example. So all of these factors were taken into account, and we won this tender. By the way, hyphen, the title that you see here above the slide, is the project name. The company I work for is called Een Afrikaanse, based in Berlin, Germany. Quickly, sorry for skipping a couple of slides, just for the sake of time. I'll be now and then skipping slides to get you the right ones. First, I want to talk to you a little bit about Namibia and why it's such a great place to do things. And first, just the geographical location and some numbers. Namibia is located in the southwestern corner of Africa. It's the second least populated country on this planet, after Mongolia. And the region that we are located is completely uninhabited. The coast is very barren, difficult to live here, and it's a rock desert. And the specific area that we are in actually has been a diamond concession area for very long already. And we are located near a small village or a small town called Lüderitz with 15,000 inhabitants, some 70 kilometers away from our project sites, which is these two, the Springbok and the Dolphin concession sites. Namibia has just under 3 million people in the population, so but over 800,000 square kilometers, so it's over 20 times the size of the Netherlands. You can drive from our site towards the capital. It's a 900-kilometer drive. I've done it. It's a lovely drive, by the way. So that's for the feeling of the country. So why is Namibia good? And first of all, it's about the government and the democracy that Namibia has, but I'll talk about that in the next slide. First, it's also this site which has access to infrastructure. So there is a port, there's a railway, there is a road touching the site. We don't have extreme hurricanes or earthquakes or whatever. So there's a lot of factors that make this site really attractive, a site of the good renewables, and the fact that it's uninhabited, which is obviously one of the factors that make the site attractive. Renewables, I'll not waste too much time on this. I think it's just good to emphasize it's just simply one of the best places on the planet to do a thing like this, because the hours of sunlight there, you have more than 3 times the hours of sunlight that we have in the Netherlands. And the wind is comparable onshore to the very best places in the North Sea. And the North Sea, obviously, installing wind turbines there is a lot more expensive than here onshore. So why is Namibia great? Well, everybody that has been there, and they also call it the Africa for beginners. It is a place where democracy is functioning. There's rule of law. We have trust that we can make agreements with the government, and that if a next government changes, that the courts will actually uphold those agreements. And we are all aware of how risky these things become everywhere in the world. Democracies that we held for sure, I'll not mention them, but suddenly seem very vulnerable. But just as a listing, we compared the countries to other famous hydrogen production countries like Egypt and Morocco, South Africa, and Namibia consistently performs a lot better than most of them. And it's considered also by the World Bank as a functioning democracy. And this is important because it gives us the certainty that we need, but it also makes the government an eligible counterpart in our discussions when we discuss what the country and the people need from the project. This is not the case when you have a dictator or a military government. I'll skip this one. It talks to the good structure that, I'll not skip it then, to the good structure that the Namibians have installed to govern this new industry. They have installed dedicated governmental bodies where a lot of ministers from different departments are participating in to make sure that that it's an all-inclusive approach and not just by a company that nobody knows what happens. So the Namibians really take things in their own hands here. Want to talk a little bit about what we do in what we call social economic development, and this is the part where we so it's one of our 4 pillars in the project, if you will. It's how do we involve Namibia in the project? Oh, there's a microphone on there somewhere. So let me just run through them. Some of them are obvious. One of them is not mentioned here because it's the most obvious one, and that is that if the country has more, let's say, industrial activities, it generates more revenues for the government. It generates revenues for, for the state itself, which is obviously great for a country that doesn't have too much spending. I'm quite convinced that that their budget, the governmental budget of Namibia, is comparable to the budget of the municipality of Groningen, just to give you a feeling. But what it will do is that we agreed on target numbers for employment in Namibia. in the sense of how many of the people that will be working on the site should be Namibian, which is a very demanding number. It's 90%. And in order to achieve this, we are already working on skills development, which is on the right top side. We need to set up schools. We need to set up training programs. We need to set up exchanges with other countries, because you don't have a welder by accident or by invention. You need to train them. You don't have an operator of a factory by invention. You need to train them. So, and all these apprenticeships and etc. need to be organized and structured. This is something where we already have a full-fledged team in Namibia working on. Local procurement center top means that we will try to buy as much as possible from companies in Namibia. And this is quite easily said, but realize that a lot of these companies are not equipped to suddenly deliver to these quantities to a project like ours. So how do we approach it? Well, we have been, for example, talking to all relevant companies already in the country, asking them how they could expand, what type of size that they could handle, and then if they could go beyond that with additional funding, which then we would like to help them with. So there's a lot of steps there that are necessary to take before you can enable a country to benefit as much as possible from a project like this. And then aside of that, there's obviously the infrastructure that we will be improving in order to just simply also build the project, but also there will come to the benefit of the country, additional roads, railways, harbors. We will also donate to a listed number of charity funds in Namibia, but I think the other things are way more important here. Let me see if this is just to paint a picture. So the top left figure here is of relevance, where you see our two concessions, the light blue ones. And the Namibian government is planning to expand that industry after the successful build of the first project, with more projects behind that. Those will be for whomever places the best bid in the eyes of the Namibians. That need not be us. And I think we won't, because we have enough hooi op ons vork, hay on our fork, if that's correct English. So we will be focusing on these two projects that we have here, or one project in two phases. And this is not the only corridor the Namibians wish to develop. There are two others along the coast further up north. Then to another pillar. So as I said, we have 4 of these pillars, and one of them is technical, the other is environmental, and then the other is social economic, where the environmental is of extreme importance. We are in a protected area, which maybe just to say that up front, that doesn't mean that you can't do anything there. But according to the rules that we have, for example, in the Netherlands as well, with regard to environmental impact assessments, the milieu impact. So the environmental impact assessment, you need to show that you have done literally everything to minimize your impact, but also in particular that you're not toppling over any endangered species, because that's the most important thing. And the way to do this is to take very considerate measures, in the sense of be very considerate of where you position things, how you build it. So in order to not put the Namibian government too much into a painful position in the moment that they issue an environmental permit, because they haven't yet, that needs to happen in the future after all the planning and all the studies have been done. We have asked the World Bank, and especially the ILF underneath the World Bank, to dictate independent requirements for our project here that the Namibians can verify on. In that way, trying to disentangle our the needs of the Namibians, our performance from conflict of interest. What is ongoing at this moment is that we have a lot of animal counting. It's a rock desert. It's very, very dry. It's only 10 millimeters of rain per year. You need to imagine that there is a salt road. You know, I've driven it various times. You can just simply drive on the salt road because people spray water on that road, salt water, and it dries up and it stays there. And the reason is there's just 10 millimeters of rain on average. It doesn't rain almost. And but it's still a region where stuff happens. So there are a select number of plants that survive in this environment, which can become very old. So especially those plants you would like to avoid, don't put a windmill on top. And so what we are doing is literally on the 4,000 square kilometers, it's the size of the province of Utrecht. We are mapping every square meter to know whether there are plants there or not. Because the most of them don't, for example. Now, we are doing extensive bird counting. We're doing extensive bat counting. So there's a lot of studies ongoing there. And only after we establish that we can build whilst keeping the requirements of the ILF in place, that we can uphold them, only then the Namibians will give an environmental permit to build here. Now, the picture also gives you a little bit more information. I already told you about the port of Lüderitz, which is up here. Most people that live here work in the mines that are in the interior. Think of zinc mine, manganese, uranium, and some others. So Namibia is also very rich in rare earth metals. And this region is still used for diamond mining, even though not so extensively anymore. Most diamonds have been collected. We will be loading the ships also in this port area, and we will be doing most of our activities here on site with windmills and solar. I think also looking at the time, Frans, I think I should stick to this and give some space for questions still, right?
Okay, thank you so much, Willem. It's quite interesting to see this, this typical practice. Maybe you can add one thing. Nienke put forward the idea of the community benefit program, and so you showed us already a number of benefits, but you already told me about your solar and wind farm, that you are connected to the nearby village. Can you say a bit how there's some benefits for the local community of your renewable energy production?
Yes, absolutely. So aside of the other factors that I mentioned, and I also want to emphasize that we try not to underestimate the impact. If we are built, what the impact is on Lüderitz. That won't be only just good because there's a lot of employment, but it's also the town will be transformed. If you can't just add 3,000 people to a town of 50,000 people without very notable differences. And that's also, a lot of people might like it, some might not. And the construction will also have its impact on the town, of course. Now, where you were referring to, Frans, is the water and the electricity. So the water at this moment is pumped up from aquifers down below, which is actually fossil water. Now, might be a surprise to anybody here that fossil water exists, but it does mean it's an aquifer that's not replenished quickly every year by rainfall. And it's an aquifer that, exists since long. What we are going to do is replace that with desalinated water from the ocean. So half of our water production will go to Lüderitz to replace this fossil water uptake. And on the other hand, we have a lot of electricity, obviously, way more than the country uses and definitely way more than the town uses. We will make that available, and the Namibians will also make use of that, definitely for the town itself. Now, it's good to realize that if you want to make this available for the whole country, you need to really consider what you're doing, because the distances are so large that the population centers in Namibia, the largest population centers, are further away from us than northern Spain is from the Netherlands. And that means that you are going to go through a lot of effort to get power from a certain region to another, even though renewable power can be generated just as well up there. And then you really need to wonder why you wanted those cables, because those are probably more expensive than the generation itself. But we leave this to the Namibians, what they want, because they do have higher capacity cables going through the country, and if they wish to connect it, that's fine. We have surplus, not at all times, by the way, because we are also reliant on solar and wind here. It's good to realize we also don't produce continuously, and you would need something as a backup, like a battery or something else. But the moment that we have production, we have a surplus that we are that has already been agreed, it will be transferred to them.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for this clarification. I think regarding at the time schedule, I would propose to thank Willem for your presentation and to at once continue to Clara, because I think a main question is also this hyphen project is still in its planning stage, you may say, and at a preparatory stage, and it's it's always the question, well, okay, what is going to be the real situation? Because a project should be realized in a context of economic, social things, international market, etc. And I think that specific is, Clara, is your issue. So please, can you tell us something about your study, the research on Brazil?
Yeah, of course. I will share my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me here. Like Frans already said, I'm a PhD candidate at Eindhoven. Helene de Koning, who I saw is here, is actually my PhD promoter. And Kiana de Klein, who is also here, we have been working together, so she's co-authoring one of my papers. My PhD focuses on the international cooperation aspects of the energy transition. And together with Helene, I've also worked on the IPCC, focusing on the chapter on technology transfer. And I've had some experience also working with the UN on tech transfer topics. And from that, we saw that there were a lot of expectations around the potential of green hydrogen in promoting not only the energy transition in developing countries, but also in helping those countries to industrialize and promote local sustainable development. So my PhD has focused a bit on, well, what are really the opportunities and risks from developing those green hydrogen exports projects. So here, like I said, well, in other words, basically, is it a good idea for developing countries to start producing and exporting the green hydrogen? How did I answer this research question? So first, I looked at the case of the green hydrogen hub at the port of Pecém in the Brazilian state of Ceará. There's a green hydrogen, a green trade corridor being created between the port of Pecém and the port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. The port of Pecém is partially owned by the port of Rotterdam. And because Ceará is close to the equator, there are very favorable wind and solar conditions, which has led to expectations, and these are numbers from the port of Rotterdam, that this green hydrogen hub in Ceará could lead to up to 25% of the EU green hydrogen imports by 2030. And this would be very important, if this hub can also lead to socioeconomic development, because Ceará is a relatively poor state when we look at, Brazil as a whole. So in terms of data, I went to Pecém in 2022, and I conducted interviews with a lot of stakeholders nationally, project developers, local government, and so on. And the results from these interviews are summarized in an article that is open access. So everybody who is interested can actually find it and read it. And I also did some economic modeling, and some results are available in a working paper. published by the Austrian Institute of Economic Research. And since Kiana is here, I'm also going to add that we are currently updating this working paper, where Kiana is also working to include the life cycle emissions. So what were my findings? There are three main takeaways that I will try to explain to you throughout this presentation. So first of all, the opportunities, they could be more limited than expected, but there could also be important risks for the local socioeconomic development. Second, there's also a great likelihood that the outcomes would be distributed in an uneven way between the developing countries that are producing and exporting the green hydrogen and the countries that would be importing that. And thirdly, we really find a need for an adequate governance framework to avoid that green hydrogen projects reinforce current global inequalities. So how did I come to these three main messages? Firstly, from the interviews, we found that the main driver for local support for green hydrogen, and that's from the government, but also from the society, was the expectation of substantial local economic benefits. So this is a quote from one interview, and we see that they say, well, the Ceará society embraced this green hydrogen project because it sees that it is a possibility to really transform the state's economy. Another interviewee said, well, we are really caring for this project, dedicating ourselves so much because we believe it will be a truly game changer for Ceará and the Northeast region. Like I said, Ceará is relatively a poor state compared to Brazil, and they hope the project will help them catch up. So, however, when I was talking to other stakeholders, those expectations, they seemed unrealistic. And first, it's because electrolysis is a very capital-intensive activity. So we don't see a lot of potential for employing people in those plants. Secondly, most of the jobs then would have to be created in the value chain, right? But if most of the project developers are importing all the equipment and all the technologies, the benefits in the value chain would also be very limited. And finally, the project is in an export promotion zone, so they are not really paying as much taxes to the local government. So I decided to put some numbers to it to see if this was really true. And I modeled the potential economic impact according to different scenarios. So on the import side, I compare when project developers, they source from local suppliers as much as possible. In the case of the Ceará, the main difference is the wind industry, because Ceará has a strong wind industry. And I compare that to when they just import everything that can be imported. And in terms of the exports, I compare just liquefying the green hydrogen and exporting with using the green hydrogen locally to produce green steel and then exporting the green steel. And this is where Kiana enters, because she modeled the life cycle emissions of these two export options. I will not be mentioning this here. If she wants to say anything at the end and we have time, that's great. But here I will focus only on the socioeconomic findings. So this figure shows you the impacts during the construction phase. And you can see impacts on value added, which is GDP generally. Then the part of GDP that is actually in the forms of incomes from salaries, so the salary income, the middle panel, and also the impacts on employment in terms of number of jobs.
Clara, we see some double sheet impression now. Yes, this is much better. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So the first thing that we see is that there is a very large difference when technologies are imported. So if you compare what is said the high LC with the low SLC, we see, for instance, in terms of employment, with the low local content, employment generation would be about a fifth of what it could have been. And it would also be limited to the construction sector. Secondly, we see, well, of course, the high local content is mainly because of the wind industry. If other countries don't have this wind industry or any other local industry, the low local content is probably what is going to happen. And thirdly, we don't really see a difference between the export scenarios because in the end, Ceará doesn't have the suppliers for the furnaces or for the liquefaction plant, so it didn't make a difference in this case. But what happens then when those plants start operating, right? So here you can also see the impacts on GDP, salaries, and number of jobs. And the first thing that we see is, of course, the difference between the high local content and the low local content is smaller in the operation phase. Because of course you have a lot more expenditures that have to be made locally, right? But you still see that for the transformation industries, so the one in purple here, the impact is halved if we think in terms of GDP, but even less than half in terms of employment. Secondly, the exports of liquefied hydrogen could lead to higher GDP growth, but the impact is barely visible in terms of salaries and in terms of employment. And this is because, like I said, well, electrolysis and also liquefaction, they are very capital intensive activities. So their contribution to GDP growth is not in the form of salaries paid to workers, but it's actually in terms of the capital remuneration. So this is the income going back to the shareholders. And well, finally, the third point is that when we look at the green sectors, most of the impacts in terms of income and employment, income is coming from the renewable electricity generation. And we also see that, well, green steel would lead to a lot more income and jobs for local workers than the export of green hydrogen. So this has two important implications in terms of the local sustainable development potential. So first, it's the question of growth for whom? Because, like I said, most of the GDP growth in the green hydrogen exports case would be the income going to the investors. These are probably not from Ceará because most of the companies there are multinationals. And secondly, investors are usually already from high-income groups. So this is not necessarily benefiting the low-income rural population, let's say. Secondly, green steel, conversely, would have a greater potential for employing local, lower income workers because of the type of worker that we have in this industry. And finally, if companies import the technologies, the benefits are much lower, but it's not that those benefits are not happening anywhere. They would actually be happening abroad in the countries that are producing the equipment. Second is the question of additionality. So if the green hydrogen production and liquefaction leads to so little additional employment compared to renewable electricity generation, then, well, what is actually, what is the green hydrogen bringing compared to a scenario where we expand the renewable energy, electricity generation anyways for energy access or just the grid decarbonization? So these 2 points suggest that the opportunities from green hydrogen exports could be very limited. And in addition to that, we also found 3 major risks. So first, there could be the risk of a delay of the local energy transition. So I think, like Willem mentioned, those projects, they are usually really in a large scale in order to, well, have a lower cost and be competitive in the energy market, in the hydrogen market. And if we look at the case of Brazil, for instance, the demand for electricity for solar and wind would be about 80% of the current installed capacity for wind, solar and wind. And of course, if we could realize all the projects that we want to realize, that wouldn't be a problem. But if we think of supply chain constraints and limited availability of finance, it could be that at some point we need to make a choice. Are we going to invest on solar and wind for the grid or for local energy access, or are we going to invest on that for producing green hydrogen for exports? The second point is that many project developers, they actually do not share knowledge with locals. So they share only the knowledge to the point that locals could be able to share, to sell the green hydrogen, but they don't explain how the technology works, or, well, the more complex knowledge behind that, which could create a dependency in the long term on the knowledge and technology providers. And finally, because the green hydrogen market is expected to be so competitive, so that basically any developing country, let's say, with renewable energy could potentially become a producer, we see that many investors are kind of playing local governments against each other, saying, well, we want this tax exemption, or we want this type of condition, or like fewer regulations in terms of labor. Otherwise, we will move our investments to a different country. And this could have the risk of leading to a race to the bottom situation, where developing country governments would ask, well, less and less conditions in order to attract the investments. So, like I said, the three main takeaways from my research is that first, the opportunities for local sustainable development could be more limited than expected, and there are important risks related to delaying the local energy transition, recreating dependencies, and leading to a race to the bottom. Secondly, there could be unequal distribution of outcomes. So the short-term benefits in terms of the, well, industrial output, decarbonizing from the use of the green hydrogen would not materialize in the developing countries, but the risks related to the delay and so on would be borne by the developing countries. And this really calls for adequate governance to avoid that we reinforce unequal patterns. Okay, adequate governance, then this brings the question of what can we do? So first, it would be important to require a minimum level of knowledge transfer and capability building to avoid these dependencies. Secondly, it would also be important to require a minimum level of local content. However, minimum level would not always be possible. So we cannot say, well, you have to buy a wind turbine from a local firm if there are no local firms that actually manufacture a wind turbine. So here the advice would be to communicate clearly about what is possible. So if you're saying, well, the impacts of this project will be X, make sure that you communicate whether you're talking about the high local content or the low local content, because these two could be very different. Also, in terms of communication, it's important to communicate clearly about the additionality of the green hydrogen project with respect to other uses of the renewable electricity. It's also important to localize further steps in the value chain, and preferably the more labor-intensive ones, to ensure that income also stays for the local workers. And if that's not possible, then it's also important to ensure that the capital revenues from the more capital-intensive activities are appropriately taxed, and that this tax is then converted into programs that will increase local skills and capabilities and future opportunities. And finally, for all of that, it's important to coordinate with other energy transition priorities. So here I would have 4 concrete points that Dutch public institutions could do. So first, help developing country governments negotiate with companies so they have a greater power of bargain and avoid the race to the bottom. Second, they could support with knowledge transfer capability building along the value chain to ensure that more firms can be involved. But here I would say to be careful about overly optimistic expectations. There is no point in training thousands and thousands of people to work on an electrolysis plant if in practice those jobs will actually never be there, right? Thirdly, communicate clearly about what is likely and additional in terms of the opportunities, but also openly discuss the potential risks. We cannot talk about justice in the outcomes of these projects if the governments did not even know what they were actually agreeing to in the first place. And clear communication will help ensure trust from citizens and from governments in the long term, because we don't want them to realize halfway that the benefits are actually much lower than what they thought at the beginning. And finally, it would be important to evaluate import regulations, especially in terms of factors that could be leading the project developers to not connect the renewable electricity projects to the grid and so on, to see how local electricity use can also become attractive, so that green hydrogen exports is a pulling force for the local energy transition and not a competition. Yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Clara, thank you very much. Very challenging presentation, I think. Well, I'm a bit inclined to ask Willem. Willem, you are dealing with all these things in practice. So, what do you think of the recommendations of Clara? Does it make sense? I think a number are already included in your project setup. Well, what's your idea?
Wij moesten Willem vertrekken.
Yeah, I believe
Willem is gone?
Building.
Willem is gone. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just 1 minute ago.
Yeah.
Nikki, you're still there, even
Yeah.
from Botswana. Would you comment on Clara's ideas and the
Yes,
presentation
definitely.
before?
And
Yeah?
I definitely recognize risks, and I love the way you mitigate them. And I think really is the same as what a lot of people say. I'm not an expert on the American side of the continent, so I'm only working on the African continent. But right here, people really want to add value to the hydrogen, and of course, for the long run, want the money they earn with selling the hydrogen, they want to use it to build their own industries here and to add value and to have more employment because they make stuff. On the part of electricity, I don't really agree, but that's specifically here. I don't know how it is on the other side of the world, because people are living so far from each other. It's a simple, like today we drove 700 kilometers. Yeah, you cannot make a cable for electricity for 700 kilometers. That's undoable, a loss of electricity. So that's why it is so interesting to use hydrogen, because you can easily transport it. The pipeline is much easier, but you can also put it in a tank. And batteries, they don't work here. It's too hot. So that's why sharing electricity in a city, I think you're right, definitely. And in dense populations, but in the way the society here is organized, it's really hard to use electricity. And for a lot of stuff, people need something that burns. And of course, they also need light for burning the light, for using lamps. So this is where you can use electricity for, but a lot of other stuff you really need hydrogen, and especially also to balance the system. So what I just told, if you have energy at daytime, but of course you need the energy when light is switched off, nighttime, then it's when you use your light. So you need storage, and you need large scale storage, and there's hydrogen also useful for. So definitely it's not only about hydrogen, it is about a combination of both.
Yeah, so maybe just an explanation, because of course the case of Brazil is a bit different in the sense that they do have like one national electricity system that is completely integrated. Electricity access is already like complete, right? And in this case, also, let's say the need for balancing is much lower, because first of all, Brazil doesn't have seasons, and geographically it is also very big. So the sun is always kind of shining somewhere. And on top of that, Brazil has a lot of hydro. So it already has like a renewable source that could be there when the wind and the sun is not. And perhaps even some pumped hydro solution would be better than having green hydrogen for storage. So that's why, like in this specific case, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Richard, you're watching the chat questions. Are there any interesting questions in this respect?
Yes, there were a lot of questions about the water that you need to produce hydrogen. These were answered by Willem in the chat before he left, stressing that all the water used would be desalinated seawater. So if you want to know more about it, check the information in the chat. And then the question of the carbon footprint of green hydrogen did come up again, including the climate cost of transporting green hydrogen from Africa to Europe. So I'm not sure if she's still there, but perhaps now Kian de Kleine can say something about that.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so so my research is on the environmental impacts, and specifically the climate impacts of green hydrogen production, but also the transport and the use. And we recently published a paper on this production in many different contexts, using different energy sources, different locations, different type of electrolyzers, and also different ways of transporting the hydrogen. And we looked at 3 different ways of transport. So pipeline transport, shipping hydrogen in liquefied form, or shipping it in the form of ammonia. And it depends on the type of transport mode that you choose, what the emissions are, and also the distance over which you want to transport it. And in general, we found that liquefying hydrogen, it has an additional energy requirement that is quite high. It adds another 20% of energy required compared to the energy that you would only need to produce the hydrogen, which is also already quite a lot because it's not a very efficient process. So that definitely adds to the emissions of liquid hydrogen transport. But the other thing is that if you want to transport hydrogen in liquid form, that you have to cool it to minus 250 degrees Celsius. And it also has a very big volume. So you need a lot of ships to transport this hydrogen. And you also have losses to the environment that are called boil-off because of this very low temperature. So in addition to the energy needs that you have to liquefy it, you also are losing some of the hydrogen along the way, and you need a lot of ships per mass that you're shipping. So that is quite a big carbon footprint, and that is definitely something to consider. And if you would, for example, use ammonia as a transporting option, there you also have the difficulty that the conversion of hydrogen to ammonia requires a lot of energy. And then at the location, the destination, the receiving location, if you want to, it depends whether you want to use that ammonia immediately, then it's still quite okay. But if you would transfer it back, like convert it back to hydrogen, you have again another very big loss and a very big energy need. So that also, wasn't a very good option in our analysis.
Yeah. Kiana, may I ask you? We had the case of Namibia this afternoon by Willem. So what would be your recommendation for Namibia and transport? Have you clear vision or answer to that already?
Yeah, I think that relates to the work that I'm doing with Clara, that Clara was also explaining now, is that using the hydrogen there instead of transporting the hydrogen itself looks like a smart way of dealing with it. Because, for example, with Clara, we looked at like steel production. So if you're using hydrogen locally to produce steel, you don't have to liquefy the hydrogen to ship it to somewhere else. So avoiding that energy loss. And also, shipping steel also doesn't, you're not losing steel along the way. So that is also.
So make the green steel over there.
I think
down south in
that tends to be our that's the direction of our conclusion. That is from both an environmental perspective and a socioeconomic perspective. That seems like a good option to consider.
Well, that's a quite relevant relevant outcome for the national discussion about Tata Steel. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Richard. Do you have any more important questions? Richard?
Yeah, I'm just checking because there's so many questions. Most of them have already been answered, I think. Yeah, there was a question to Chiara on the risks of green hydrogen investments for the host governments. What would you recognize government of Brazil or the regional government as for mitigating the risks?
Yeah, so when I said that most of the risks would be borne by the developing country governments is also in the sense of so like I said, first, having their own energy transition delayed is a big risk that would happen there, because of course, if you have, let's say, a wind park that would before be used to decarbonize the grid, but now it will be used to make green hydrogen that will not stay in the country, you're missing the opportunity to accelerate your own decarbonization, right? And then, of course, when we think of international negotiation the process, then you will see that the emission will go down in the country that is using the hydrogen, but it's not going down in the country that is actually producing the hydrogen. So that also has some political implications there. And also, I think there's a very big political risk if they are selling this project as something that will transform the local economy, and then it ends up not being the case. And you, of course, create also, we know from literature more focused on oil exports, that if you have this surge of income coming from a very capital intensive activity that's focused on exports, first, it can lead to political instability and corruption in the government because it's a very big stream. It also decreases the incentives for investing in education in the long term, because you think, no, we have this natural resource, we don't need to do anything anymore. But then it also exposes your economy to volatility in global market prices. And it could also increase inequalities, because of course the people working in the green hydrogen hub, they will have a higher than average salary, but you're not really transferring in any way those benefits to the lower income workers. So these are some of the risks. There's of course also the risk that they in the well-intended effort to attract the investments, they might end up not being able to tax any of these investments or the capital that is going to the investors, that they need to offer subsidies, that they need to decrease their own labor conditions, because in the end, they don't really have much more to offer, right?
So, Clara, may I add a question to this, but focusing on the Dutch situation. So we started from the Africa strategy, and the government put forward the idea of the just and equal partnership with Africa. So can the Dutch or maybe the European government with the African government, can they get along and realize projects in a good way, or is there are these risks more worldwide, and should the international governmental institutions be abroad, and should we have standards and regulations internationally? What's your idea? Can we do it region by region?
Yeah, so I think there are pros and cons in that, right? Because of course, every region will be different, and every region has some very specific challenges. We cannot, like in Latin America, we also have Chile, Argentina, like Brazil, that are looking at exporting. The challenges that these countries face are likely very different than challenges that countries in sub-Saharan Africa are facing, right? So I think there are advantages of having this regionally, but the question is, of course, I think bilaterally, so one-to-one is something that will not work, exactly from what I said, right? Because the risks are probably very similar across different developing countries, but also because the developing countries, let's say, they also lack, the governments themselves, they lack many times the capabilities to conduct the analysis. So they don't really know, and then they are going to rely on external information which may not be accurate to their case. So I do think that there's a lot to gain if you put the developing countries together, because then they can also learn from each other. But in any case, on the question of like whether good agreements can be made, I think again it's a matter of good communication, right? And yeah.
Okay, thanks. Richard.
Yes.
Room for some more questions.
Yeah, one interesting suggestion, which refers back to what Willem said about there not being carbon sources in a country like Namibia that you could use to produce e-fuels, for instance. You need not only hydrogen, but also carbon to produce these fuels for aviation, for instance. And then there was this suggestion that you could also draw CO2 from the air and use that carbon. It's called direct air capture. That would produce more climate-friendly fuel for aviation and perhaps other sectors that are difficult to decarbonize. I don't know if Chiara or perhaps Kiana can answer that. Is it feasible?
Yes, I can answer that. I think it's not feasible yet because direct air capture is a technology that is still in development. So it's not at the commercial scale available. It's very expensive. And furthermore, it requires a lot of energy, like a lot. Not like, because even though CO2 is like a problem that we have in our atmosphere, it's still very difficult to actually get a lot of air and then to filter out this CO2. And it's often a very energy intensive process to also separate that CO2 from the material at which it has been captured. So this is still very challenging, and this could work. So in the future, if you combine that CO2 from the air with hydrogen to produce a fuel, but you need a lot of energy again, and it has to be from a very low emission source. So it has to be renewable, and you also have to make sure that it's not competing with other uses of renewable electricity. Yeah, so that seems also quite challenging to me at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Clara, at the end, what you came up with a lot of recommendations already, but if you now focus on the Dutch government, which made some political agreements with a number of countries. And well, this is the context of this webinar series is the Social Green Party. So what kind of political action would you propose as the first step to go on with these hydrogen agreements? Can you come up with any action proposal?
Yeah, so I think I would maybe like to divide this into, let's say, two different questions, right? So one question is like for the agreements that are already being made in terms of green hydrogen, I think, yeah, the recommendations that I gave are pretty much the same. So I think, build local capabilities, ensure that there's the maximum of the value chain that is local, and I think most importantly have a clear communication with these countries with what is possible and what is likely, and also discuss the risks, because many times we see that the risks are not openly discussed. But I must say it's better that the developing country perhaps doesn't agree to do it now than in 5 years comes back on the decision, right? And I think the second question is more, and it also relates to something that we found also with Kiana, that, for instance, locating the green steel, right, close to the green hydrogen would be better for local socioeconomic development there, would also be better from an emissions perspective. But then this could of course create tensions with the, let's say, Dutch goals. And we saw also here on the chat, for instance, the mention of Tata Steel, right? So I think the second question is, well, maybe rethink whether the import of green hydrogen is actually the best solution. And start thinking of, well, yeah, what are the possibilities if not? And maybe, yeah, good to mention is also that actually my last chapter of the PhD focuses on Tata Steel relocation. But yeah, I think it's also important to start thinking about it, because for the industries it's also much cheaper to do it there. So it might happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Quite interesting. Nienke, is Nienke still around? Teacher, you know? Nienke Homan, are you still?
She's
Are you
gone.
still there? Yeah, you're gone. Okay. So are there some final questions? Otherwise, we are going to wind up this session. Richard, any urgent questions left?
I just saw a question from Angela coming in. I'm reading it now. She supports the idea of producing green steel in Brazil, and says, yeah, could it be a partial replacement for Tata in IJmuiden? I read that as could we do with a smaller steel refinery in the Eimond?
Should we ask Angela? Angela, would you add something to this summary of Richard? Angela, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Not in focus, but that's Zoom. What I posted is that I had the feeling with Nienke's story that it was her approach was more on replacing natural gas with H2 instead of focusing on decarbonization of the industry, which I think is a shame, because I think the lowest value of hydrogen is in the use of domestic heating and cooking and everything. That shouldn't be a goal. If in many years to go we might have a surplus of green hydrogen, well, yeah, maybe it can use, just like transport. It's not a viable option for transport, because even Volvo has to battery operate. As for Tata, one of the things which I think is very important, and that is that you should be willing to produce goods you need locally instead of throwing the pollution over the fence to the neighbors and import everything. Tata, the Hoogovens, wasn't built just to build steel, but it was built because we couldn't get the steel on the market. Today we are living in a full market-based neoliberal economy, and hey, we can buy it from China. That sort of ideas, which is absolutely ludicrous. We already exported a lot of our own know-how and technology to low-wage countries, and partly with this we are doing the same. And I think that is modern colonialism. Simply, you can build things there, but don't throw our own pollution over the fence to them.
No. So, Angela, you don't agree with the suggestion to to produce the steel down in Namibia or somewhere there, where the lines are short and the sun is shining?
I think we should keep production here.
Production here. Yeah.
We should keep production in Europe, and we should have more production go back to Europe.
Yes. And you're using hydrogen for it or not?
I think that Tata, with the plans that have come up out of from outside of Tata, I think it's a very good plan. It certainly for the amounts that they're producing now, it needs a lot of energy and a lot of hydrogen.
Okay.
Which is difficult to produce here.
Well, thank you, Angela, for your question and your discussion. I think we are going to wind up this session. Of course, there will be a summary of the discussion, and also the presentations will be made available on the website of GroenLinks Milieunetwerk. Maybe the reports will take some time, but well, we apologize, but we do our best for it. And I would invite you all for next week speaker on Thursday. We had a tryout from Botswana. Well, it works. So we hope to welcome Mr. Salim Fakir. He is director of the African Climate Foundation. And he will, well, give us a view on energy transition from Africa itself. So Thursday, same time, we hope we can welcome you again. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for the speakers. Clara, I think you're the only speaker left, but thank you very much. It was a very, very nice story and good for a discussion. And well, it's a very good success with your work and the finalization of your thesis.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you all. So have a good evening. See you hopefully next week. Bye-bye.